I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause the view from the spectrum is a better point of view. The question at hand.
Hi, I'm Tally and welcome back to Autism 30. Today on our podcast, we're having another wonderful parent talk for your listening ears. And once again, we have in studio Tina and Kathy. Welcome back.
Oh, thank you.
It's so great to have you guys back because I know this episode is really well loved by our audience. And with our audience's questions, let's just start. So the first question is do you ever find that your child's advances ebbs and flows, and how does this make you feel, and what do you do about it? Kathy, let's start with you.
I think I would have to say that my son used to have more ebbs and flows when he was younger, and I'm happy to say now he's 12, and I'd say we are more constant small steps forward. Our valleys are maybe just a bad day, a bad afternoon. It's not maybe what we used to see when he was less mature. But I can tell you how it affected me.
And how did that affect you?
Oh yeah, when he's upset, or when he's not at his best, or when I'm miserable.
And I can completely understand that.
It really affects me.
They always say, like, there's an old saying, if mama ain't happy, nobody's happy.
Nobody's happy.
But I
So
feel like
true.
it's if the autistic child is not happy, then ain't nobody happy. That's what I sometimes feel like it is.
Very
Absolutely.
true. That's in our house for sure.
And what about you, Tina?
Yeah, this seems like the story of my life. And so the metaphor that we often use is sort of like a ball rolling up a hill. So you go up and you go down, and you go up and you go down. But over time, the ups are a little bit higher and the downs are where your previous ups were, if that makes sense. So, yeah, it was huge. And I found myself really affected by the downs. For us, sometimes it's seasonal. We find that our springs are really bad. I think it's a combination of coming back from a 2-week spring break. There's something about the time change in the spring. The light's lighter. She's not sleeping as well. I mean, it was one of our consultants who we had for 3 years, who finally on the second year kind of mentioned it. In the third year, she's like, well, it's April. We always have bad Aprils. So sometimes knowing it might be coming would help, right? But I had a really good mentor who told me, I think if it's been done once, it can be done again. So whenever, and we've probably talked on this podcast before, and if not, I'm sure we'll talk in the future about how we celebrate successes as parents of ASD kids differently. And the smallest thing is a huge deal for us.
Yes.
And so I guess in the dark times, you try to remember that there will be good times again and what your successes have been. And friends and family are pretty good about that too. They'll remind you, like, this isn't forever. And sometimes if you can get some catastrophic thinking, like, oh, this was so bad. She's never going to talk, or she's never going to be toilet trained, or whatever it was. So, for example, we just had a family holiday, and let me backtrack. We've had a good few months with a lot of successes, a lot of more social engagement, some language in new ways. I'm talking like 4 or 5 sentence or 4 or 5 word utterances.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And then, we just had a family trip that had some good times. But then at the end of the trip was this horror show of a meltdown. And my daughter just wanted me to buy a book that I'd already purchased for her. And I was trying to explain, we already own it. It's in the car. And she just couldn't listen, couldn't understand. And it was just like a huge meltdown in front of so many people. And then I had to try to drag her to the parking lot, and she's screaming in the road. And it was just like, where's all those successes? But I think I did a good job of channeling, like, no, we've actually done really well. And, you know, trying to remember. And, you know, even when I said to a friend, like, oh, I felt like we were back at square one. And even when I said it, I knew that it wasn't authentic. It was one of those automatic thoughts that come into your head that you can get trapped in. And she just called me out and said, no, you're not back at square one. You know that's not true.
Yes.
And I was like, actually, I do know that's not true. And I almost felt embarrassed that I'd even said it, right? So in a lot of ways, that was my own having some therapy help that helped me realize those automatic thoughts and when they're not true. But I've lost my train of thought. But the point is that, like, we have ups and we have downs. And I guess going back to what we do about it is, in the down times, I try to remember the successes. I try to remember that they will come again. And that, you know, accept that sometimes there's things out of my control that are causing it, like time of the year or changes in school or anything else.
And it could be a great number of things. And I agree with a lot of what you're saying, because I know when you're first starting out therapy and when your child is first starting out, one of the things that you feel is that your child is going to continually go on an uphill stream and they're never going to fall back. So when you do, as you're saying, all these negative thoughts start going in your head, when your child does start to regress, you're thinking, oh dear, is this the best it's going to be? And all these negative thoughts keep on coming into your head. And like you are saying, very true, is that you want to know what? It's only a temporary thing.
The first regression is the hardest too. Like when you're newly diagnosed, don't you think? The first time that you thought especially when you're on you're
on a roll.
We finally got our therapist,
Yes.
and I got a speech therapy, and then I found that I read all the positive stuff you could find.
Yeah.
Like
Oh,
some
gosh,
kids
yeah.
test off the spectrum by kindergarten, and I felt like I had chosen the right therapy. I was in the know.
Yes.
I'd done my research. These people were excellent. I had such high hopes. And the first time I realized that, like, A, she regressed, and B, like, this is not going to get us to where we need to go. Like,
Yes.
our pace is not in pace with what I thought it would be. That is when I had the darkest time. So, I think it's good to have this podcast so people can hear that, like, honestly, someone once told me, or where did I read this? I can't remember, so I can't properly give the author attribution, but it said, like, autistic adults don't act like autistic children. Like,
Yes,
there
very
isn't
true.
a natural maturing that will happen. And so your 16-year-old, more than likely, I mean, every autistic child is different, will not be doing what they do as an autistic 4-year-old. And so,
Yes.
like, sometimes when you're feeling that sort of darkness and you're in the moment of your child's regression, it's hard to remember that. But
And also, not only regression, I know with myself, one of the things that concerned me is my child was doing therapy for an awful long time and there was no advancement. It's like they had plateaued.
Right.
And you're thinking, oh dear gosh, I'm not seeing any new developments.
Did I
and
choose the right therapy? Or
exactly.
or
You
should I
start to-
change? Not that you made a mistake from the beginning, but is it time to change now? Because kids change too, and sometimes you do have to change therapy.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Absolutely. However, one of the things that you're saying is true. When you feel in the darkest times, it's always good to think positive, because I mean, our experience has been those plateaus happen, but then the leaps at the end are amazing. And yes, they can regress. But I think one of the things that I'm happy that we're all mentioning is that this is a common thing for our children, that no success is completely uphill, that sometimes they do regress and sometimes they plateau, but you keep on going. And I do agree that an awful lot of stress that I find us parents go through is when, as you're saying, Tina, is when those dark thoughts happen in your head and you think there's never going to be another positive thing. But I think what we're saying here today is that to keep positive, because it will eventually come.
Can I just put in a plug for CBT here? So CBT is a kind of counseling called cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's I paid for the therapy myself for myself to go through therapy. And so it's an alternative to classic, like, talk psychotherapy where you just kind of lay on a psychiatrist's couch and every week tell them what happened.
Yes.
So and the whole purpose of CBT is to address those negative thoughts. And so it was expensive. It's not covered by BC MSP or our healthcare plan, but I figured if I can spend $120 from my daughter's speech therapist every
an
week in and
hour.
out,
Yeah.
I mean, I
Yes.
can spend. And the good thing about CBT, it's not like, dare I say, chiropractor or some other things where you have to keep going. Like the whole point of it is to do it and then be done with it because it retrains your brain. So one thing that my therapist said was like, it's not about not feeling negative. It's just about feeling the right amount of negative. Right. So like,
Interesting.
if something bad
Yes.
happens in your life, CBT or therapy is not to say, oh, it's not a bad thing. Of course it's a bad thing, but all the negative thoughts that make it bigger, etc., that make it worse than it is. Right. So instead of thinking, I can't do this, my life is so hard,
So it teaches
retranslating it to a realistic thought, like my life is hard today, but some days are less hard than others. And I am really supported and I'm making progress.
And one of the-
In a more realistic thought, instead of my son or daughter has regressed so much and it's terrible and she's never going to do XYZ. It's more like, no, today was a tough day, but we're on the right path and there will be progress. So the only reason I'm mentioning this is that you said to stay positive, but then sometimes when you're in the darkest days, someone just telling you like, cheer up, it'll be better. That's met with resistance because it's like, how do you know it's going to be better? Right. So,
Absolutely.
So you can't just be falsely positive. It's about just being realistic about, yeah, it's a bad time, but it will get better.
And I think one of the things that you're mentioning, which I think is wonderful, is that if you find that you need it, go for help, because of the fact that if you don't, then you're festering, which is never a positive situation. And I think for parents out there who do need that extra help, to go out there and get it. And your recommendation, absolutely, if anybody is interested. What's that therapy called again?
So cognitive behavioral therapy. And let me just say that cognitive behavioral therapy is used for all sorts of psychiatric conditions, but like it's used for just, classic depression, but also like OCD, anxiety. And if we ever get to a podcast topic about psychiatry, not that I'm a psychiatrist and can offer much, but a lot of the programs that have been really shown to work for kids with anxiety is basically a kidified version of CBT. So some of the
Interesting.
stuff from children, some of the books out there are basically bringing CBT for kids and helping them learn what those automatic negative thoughts are and having more realistic thoughts. And the only challenge, of course, is that you need to be somewhat verbal. So what I found is there is some research out there about how to bring CBT down to even basic levels for maybe kids that are less verbal. So those are things like taming the worry dragons. So those
Okay.
taming the worry dragons is for kids that are verbal, but the research was taking it even down more and calling those feelings like yucky feelings. And when I have a
Okay.
yucky feeling, like what can I do to like figure out what's going on and etc. But that's very early. I think it was Autism Speaks. One of my feeds from Autism Speaks was talking about this research, but it wasn't ready for like go live. It wasn't like a program that had been packaged that parents could use because they're still trying to figure out if it even really works, because most of CBT is identifying your feelings and translating them and challenging them to make sure that they're authentic and real, and they're not like worse than they should be. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it. Maybe Wikipedia would do better or something.
You are
But
so knowledgeable. You
Yeah.
always have so much stuff to share.
Absolutely.
Tina. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I mean,
And one of the things is I would suggest that if people are interested, to go on Google and actually do the research yourself.
yeah, well, don't listen to me, but I mean, listen to me, but then you obviously go and confirm out in the world or talk to your physician. Like my family physician recommended the one. And funny story, the patient had the same, my psychologist had the same last name as me. So I was like, oh, well, I have to trust them. They're Dr. blah, blah, blah.
That's not a recommendation I have, but that's a cute story. But anyhow, I want to get on to the second question on our list, is which kind of ties into our conversation here, is good development doesn't always equate to good behavior, and don't feed the bear. What do these comments or statements mean to you, Tina?
I feel like I've been doing all the talking here, so maybe just a really
for
quick
it.
thing.
No.
I guess like behavior and development are obviously two different things, and so I guess different therapies will approach it in different ways as well. And I think a lot of this goes back to what kind of therapy you've chosen for your child, because some therapy is more behavior based, and it treats autism as if it's a behavioral disorder, and some therapies treat it as a social communication disorder. And so I feel like if you're treating it like a social communication disorder, where you're trying to go back to where development went off track and help the child develop those skills that a neurotypical child would develop, then often as they progress, they may start to get some of those behaviors that maybe a normal child would have at 2 or 3. So,
Okay.
and then you're seeing that behavior in a 6 or 7-year-old. And so it looks like bad behavior. Like why are they hitting, or why are they tantruming, or why are they, whatever it is. But sometimes that's actually a developmental step, because maybe before they didn't care what you thought. And now they
Yes.
know that, if I tantrum, there's another person who can might help me get something, right? So my daughter learned how to fake you out. So she'd keep your eye contact, kiss you, hug you, feel around your back pocket, and steal your iPhone. And she is so good at it. She has stolen 3 strangers' iPhones, and my husband had to return them or bring them to Lost and Found. Don't turn my daughter in. But she so people think, oh, she's so affectionate, she's so great. And oh, she just stole your iPhone. But that she even knew. I mean, that shows theory of mind, right? That my mind, if I can distract this other person, they won't know I'm stealing their phone, right?
Yes.
Sometimes it's like, I'm going to hit you because I want to socially engage with you, but I don't know how. And I think we're playing tag, but really you don't know I'm playing tag. I can't verbalize I'm playing tag. I just walk up to you on the playground. And I think this is an example that I've seen in some literature from friend to friend. So I want to make sure I credit that. They hit the person and they kind of look at them and then run away. And that was an attempt at social engagement, right?
Okay, so now what you're saying, I see my son does that kind of stuff all the time. So like you say, it's great development, but it doesn't look like good behavior, does it? No.
Yes.
Yeah, because he doesn't know how to play properly. So he's doing what he can to try and get your attention.
Absolutely. And I know with my son, one of the things is that before we started therapy and whatnot, he would very quietly sit in the corner with his books and not really engage and not really, and everybody used to say, oh, you have such a beautifully behaved child. But the reality of his situation is it wasn't actually a positive thing because of the fact that he was in his own bubble, I should say, and he didn't really interact. And now through therapy and all of these wonderful developments that have been made, he's finally coming out of his bubble, but it's not necessarily a positive thing. And it doesn't look like a positive thing.
It is a positive thing.
But it's a totally positive thing because of the fact that my son now is displaying certain behaviors that some people could deem as bad behavior, but it's the best thing for him. And it's like one of the therapists said that, you know what, your child is displaying behavior that would be typical for a preschool child to have. So the behaviors in a preschool that they accept at that age, your child is doing now because he hasn't been through that. Now he's starting to do that. So it's not, because of his age, it doesn't necessarily look like positive behavior, but it's extremely positive because now he's developing further. Right. So that's kind of what that statement means to me. Do any of you?
I know when I first told one of our therapists that my son lied to me, which is quite cute because he's nonverbal, but he loves to eat. So we have a lock on the fridge door. And when I say he's nonverbal, he has a handful of words he can say. And so he was asking me for juice. He wanted juice.
Yes.
Oh, okay. So I unlock the fridge door, and as I'm reaching down to get his juice, he snatches the cheese, which is what he really wanted. So that was pretty clever. That was good.
Yes, it is clever.
Development.
Yeah. He used he used what he was allowed to have to get you to open the door. Yeah.
Sneaky.
Very good.
Yeah, no, I remember a therapist once telling me that if your child learns to lie, it's actually a really positive thing.
Exactly.
And I agree. The second my son first told his first lie, I know typical parents would think, oh, this is horrible.
Yeah.
I think my husband and I actually cheered.
Celebrated.
We thought it was brilliant.
I know.
Now,
Yeah.
to get on to another question is, how do you cope with your child that reacts aggressively, and what do you do about it? What skills have you applied that help, and what have you learned through the whole process? So,
Well, that's a
Kathy.
subject that yeah, we know very well. We have a child who's not. We've never been told. What a lovely. What did you? The term you used? A perfect behaved child.
Perfectly
yeah,
behaved child.
We've never been told that. So my son went through a stage. I'd have to say, probably about 4 years ago, where he became quite aggressive, and it was tough. And when a child comes at you aggressively, I think your first reaction is you want to scold them and you want to tell them, no,
yes.
stop it. That's not nice. But I think that, to go back to your last one, that kind of feeds the bear.
Yes.
And what I have learned over the years is to acknowledge you're mad. You are mad. I can see you're mad. It's okay to be mad. And tell him what he can do instead.
Yes.
You can use your talker. You can use your communication book. I think maybe you want something. The other thing is not a lot of words. Give them space.
Yes.
Give them space. Give them time. Sometimes you have countdown or sort of calm down strips.
Yes.
As to things that you can do. They use that at school. But in the heat of the anger and the heat of the aggression, it's like, take a deep breath is just going to get you kicked in the shins.
Yes.
I think
but
my
you
daughter
could-
once was like, "No breath."
Oh, really?
Okay, no breath.
Headphones, give them space. Actually, we created something. I think with my son, the aggression really came from a place of anxiety
Of course.
and anxious about something, and maybe frustration that he couldn't communicate what he was anxious about. And hey, you're the closest person to me. I'm going to take it out on you. And closest, I don't mean by the nearest.
No.
But you know what I mean? You take things out on the people that you love the most.
And I
And-
hear that repeatedly
yeah.
over and over again.
So I was the punching bag for a long time, and it was hard. And it took a long time to really learn the way to handle him best.
Yes.
Didn't you also take some self-defense courses for yourself, or
I
you were thinking about it or
I
something?
was going to. Someone through the school had suggested that the EAs at school take them, and wouldn't it be great if the parents took them too? I did learn a few blocks that became very helpful.
That's
Your
a
son
great idea.
Is getting bigger, right? And
Oh,
at some point
yeah.
he's going to
Bigger
be an
and
adult
stronger.
and stronger. And
Yeah.
so, it'd be interesting to see if there's some sort of like most of the self-defense courses out there, like to stop rapists and stuff. Obviously,
Yeah.
it'd be interesting if we could find someone who could do
Well, I think there
must
are
be
those
something,
people out
because
there.
like for nurses
Yeah.
and people that have to deal with.
Sure,
Yeah.
exactly. And EAs, right?
Well, I know
skills.
Sorota Alchemy, the podcast that I did in the prior, they offer self-defense.
Oh, is that right? Oh, okay.
But you don't want to. A lot of this, as long as it's not self-defense, it's a different kind of
As an
self-defense, because you
aggression,
can't.
just
You don't want to
protecting,
hurt the
yeah.
kid, right?
No.
You know what I mean?
And
Yeah.
this wouldn't be hurting the kid. This would be moving yourself out of the
I think that's what you kind of remove yourself.
yes.
Give him something. Maybe just pass him something. Pass him some headphones. Pass him a blanket. Things
Yes.
that are calming to him. And but what I was going to say is one thing that we did that seemed to help us get through the rough time was we had a closet in his room, just a single doored closet, and we made it a little sensory place for him.
That's wonderful.
With throw pillows on the floor and different fabrics on the walls, some like, I don't know, like gardening gloves kind of textures, and different things to feel, some beaded curtains, and just a place to go when he was feeling so overwhelmed. to the point, where he had a place to go just to calm down. It was
Yes.
quiet, it was relaxing, it was his space. And we still have it. He doesn't need to use it anymore, or for just now anyway.
Yes.
Which is great, but it's there for him.
Yeah,
It's helpful.
that's
Just a little hidey hole for him.
and I think that's a really great strategy that probably other people can use as well. I know in the way of this question, I have a disclosure to make about my own personal beliefs, and I think many people out there might hold the same. I know that because I was a teacher and I'm a strong advocate where I don't believe in corporal punishment and I don't believe at yelling at kids, and my son, I mean, the way my husband and I have raised him is we've never raised our voice to him.
Yeah, that's not in our nature either, but
Exactly. And we've never physically hit him, and we've always maintained a household of calm, and we've never allowed him to watch violent videos or play aggressive games. And when my son started behaving aggressively, to me, this was a real shock, because my prejudices and my beliefs before were that children that displayed those, they've obviously must have
learned
seen
it
it,
at home.
must have learned it at
Right,
home, or they
right.
must have seen video games where that's done, or they must have done something. And I know I used to have that judgment in my head, and I'm thinking, I have a child with autism. I'm a teacher. I believe in calm. And when my child started to behave aggressively, it floored me, because I'm thinking, where did this come from? In my head, we've done everything, quote unquote, right in that way, because we've never, even my husband and I were very calm with each other at home. So when my child started to do this, and I think one of the reasons why I'm saying this and outing myself as to my prejudice is that having a child with autism and having a child really challenges your thoughts, and it's completely enlightened me and opened up my head, my thought patterns. So if any of you are thinking out there where if a child is behaving aggressively, if a child is doing this, that, and the other, it doesn't necessarily mean that they've watched violent video games, that their parents are physical with them, or that they do anything at home. What I've learned through this process, really the inability for them to communicate adequately their feelings is beyond frustrating, and some can lash out in an aggressive way. And I think the sooner we learned that, the more able we were and able to deal with it in a positive manner, instead of feeling like it was a discipline, use it as a teaching, use it to teach my child what you're mentioning, positive strategies, instead of thinking this behavior needs to be curbed. What can my husband and I learn about this to be able to help him in the most positive way? And I know one of the therapists told me, and I couldn't agree with her more, is she said, one of the things you don't want to do to your child is make him feel bad about himself when he's doing these behaviors, because he doesn't mean it in the intent that you would believe that it's done.
I'd have to say my son is very, would feel very remorse. Is that remorseful? Remorse? I don't know.
As do I, for what I used to believe.
After he would, act in an aggressive way. But it just made me think of something, was the fear that I used to have of taking a child who was kicking me and screaming and hitting me and trying to put him in the car in a parking lot and drive away with him. I just always thought...
People might think you're
I
abducting
always
him,
thought that. I
Yes.
always thought, oh my God. And if somebody comes and tries to, I might just punch them, in the heat of that,
Yes.
the emotions that you're dealing with at that time. I know one of the therapists I had suggested that I have a letter signed that basically just says, my son has autism, and sometimes, it might look like this and it might look aggressive, and I, give my therapist permission to
like restrain
him if necessary, and, for his own safety, and thought it was something to be concerned about.
Absolutely, and that's totally understandable. And Tina, what do you have to add?
Oh, just really quickly, I just wanted to say that, the aggressive behavior is very different depending on their age and their development, right? So an aggressive behavior
True.
in a young ASD child might be different from an older one, or depending where where their skill set is or their development. Are they high functioning autistic? Is it a new behavior or an old behavior? But most of it, I think, is just trying to find out what the cause is. So I think listening to Kathy talk, most of the time it sounds like she's describing a situation where her son is frustrated and or upset or dysregulated, and helping him become regulated. But I think there's lots of different ways that they can show aggression. And so, I agree, we should never make our kids feel bad. But I think developmentally, my daughter's at a place where sometimes she's just acting naughty. She's hitting her brother, and she completely knows it's wrong, and she's not dysregulated. She may not have the verbal skills, but she does have them if you force her to. And so sometimes it is just bad behavior, and sometimes we can't, we run into this is a whole nother topic, but make autism an excuse, right? So sometimes if she's just hitting her brother because she wants something, and that's an easier way to get it out of him than asking him politely or whatever. It's true, she doesn't have the skills. It is related to her autism, but it doesn't mean that she, that it's like, oh, she couldn't help herself. She could still help herself. And so sometimes we do have to call her to account. And so just like meltdowns can be like a tantrum because they want something, or it can be a dysregulated meltdown. Same thing. Sometimes aggressive behavior is a lack of communication. Sometimes it's dysregulation. Sometimes they're hungry. Sometimes, you need to look at the social skills. Is it too loud? And sometimes you have to, it's all about figuring out what was the point of the aggression so you can resolve it in the moment and then help prevent it going forward.
And I think what you're mentioning is absolutely right. Because of the fact that you have to figure out, is it the behavior or is it the autism? And you want to punish one or not punish one. You want to parent one. Sorry, I hate the word punish. So you want to train one.
Yeah.
And handle the other, if that makes sense, which actually is going to be the next question on our next Parent Talk podcast. So I'd love you to tune in for that, because we are all out of time for this episode.
Wow.
Oh, no.
Already.
Can I say one more thing, please?
Absolutely.
The last thing I just want to say is a shout out to all the moms out there, because I know when there's a meltdown, and we've been talking about how we want to parent that behavior and, all the right things to do and not punish and not yell. But we're human, and I've like screamed crazy at my daughter sometimes and sounded like my mother when I was like, oh my God, I sound like my mother. So don't in the moment, if you just get mad and then you calm down and then you deal with it, it's okay. You're human. I don't want us to put ourselves out there like we're these great parents who always handle everything perfectly. Maybe you guys are, but I am not. And I just don't want anyone listening who has had a moment where they maybe weren't at their best to feel like insecure or upset about that. I think we're all doing the best we can.
And I think that's a really nice touch to end
Very well
off.
said.
So I want to thank you once again for joining us in studio today,
having
Kathy and
us.
Tina.
Yeah, really fun one.
And I want to thank you, our Autism 30 audience, for joining us today. And once again, I know I haven't mentioned it in a long time, but we really value your questions. So if you want to send in your questions for our Parent Talk panel, you can do so by going to our webpage at autism30.com and go to the word contact and click down and fill all your details and send us in those questions so we can answer your question on the next Parent Talk podcast. But in the meantime, once again, this is Tally telling you to live in love.
Hey yo, I'm an autism awareness angel, making sure my wings protect the different, the stranger than. I'm an autism awareness angel. It's good, cause I'm cool with the unique behavior. I'm an autism awareness angel. Will you accept me? Cause I accept you. I'm an autism awareness angel, cause a view from the spectrum is a better point of view.